Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time, we're tackling something that's super important to all of us, no matter who you are, healthcare. But we're going to be looking at it from, well, maybe not the angle you're used to. We're going behind the scenes into the world of healthcare technology management. HTM.
HTM.
Yeah. It's all the folks working hard to keep the medical equipment in hospitals running smoothly. And we've got this really awesome report from PartsSource to dig into.
Oh, this is a good one.
It is. And the best part, they've got data from over 5,000 hospitals. That's a huge sample size.
Absolutely. That's not just a little peek. It's like a panoramic view of what's happening in HTM across the entire country.
Exactly. So we're not just talking about one hospital's experience. We're talking about trends that are impacting the whole system.
Right. Exactly.
So the report starts off, they set the scene by talking about what they call a perfect storm in HTM. Staff shortages, supply chain problems, and rising costs all happening at the same time. It's a lot for these folks to handle.
It really is. Try to put yourself in their shoes for a second. Can you imagine being responsible for keeping an entire hospital's worth of equipment working? All those life-saving machines.
Oh, and while dealing with all those problems we just talked about? No way.
It's a tough job, no doubt about
It
it.
really is. And speaking of rising costs, the report brings up a pretty shocking fact. The cost of those medical equipment parts, it's going up way faster than just regular inflation.
Yeah, that's a problem.
They even have a special index they track called the Medical Parts Index,
The MPI.
the MPI. And since 2022, it's been outpacing the regular consumer price index, the one we all see at the grocery store.
So that's a double whammy for hospitals, right?
Yeah.
So a 1-2 punch.
Yeah.
Not only are prices going up everywhere, but those crucial parts they need are getting even more expensive.
It's like being hit from both sides, and it makes you think, what happens when hospitals just can't keep up with those costs?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? I mean, it can't be good, that's for sure. You start thinking about delays in repairs, maybe even equipment going down altogether.
Compromising patient care.
Exactly. And that's why this data is so important. It's a wake-up call. It forces us to really look at this issue and consider the consequences.
Okay, so then what can hospitals actually do about this? I mean, they can't just wave a magic wand and make inflation go away.
Well, they can't, you're right. But there are some options. And the report digs into a pretty interesting one. The whole debate between using original equipment manufacturer parts, OEM parts, versus those compatible parts.
OEM versus dot compatible.
Okay.
I think most people, myself included, just assume that those OEM parts, the ones made by the company that made the original machine, are always going to be the best and safest option. But is that always true? Especially with these costs going up.
That's a great question, and this report actually challenges that assumption. They use something called the quality return rate. It's kind of like a return rate for online shopping,
Like when that sweater just doesn't fit right, you send it back.
Exactly. So a lower QRR means fewer parts are coming back because they're defective. And what they found is pretty surprising. The QRR for compatible parts, especially the brand new ones, is often just as good as the OEM parts, sometimes even better.
Really? That's interesting. So you're saying maybe the name brand isn't everything.
It might not be. The data seems to back that up.
Okay, so if the compatible parts are just as good, why the price difference?
Well, there could be a few reasons. Some of those compatible part companies, they might be laser focused, really specialized in certain types of equipment or even just specific components.
So they really know their stuff.
Yeah, and that expertise could lead to higher quality, fewer mistakes. There's also the possibility that they have really strict quality control, keeping a close eye on everything to catch problems before those parts even leave the factory.
So it's not just about the name on the box, it's about what's going on inside those companies, how they're making those parts.
Exactly. And that's where data becomes so valuable. It helps us get past those assumptions we all have and make decisions based on evidence. Think about it. If hospitals could competently use more of those compatible parts without sacrificing quality, that's huge.
It could free up so much money to put toward other things, new equipment, more staff, you name it.
It's a big deal.
And speaking of saving money, this report also digs into something that I think a lot of people find confusing, the whole world of service contracts.
Service contracts, oh yeah, especially those expensive ones from the OEMs, are they really worth it? That's the question everyone asks.
Right. So the report brings up another option, these independent service organizations, ISOs. What's the story there?
Well, get this. The PartsSource data found that for a whopping 91% of medical equipment types, ISOs scored just as good as or even better than the OEMs when it comes to service quality.
Whoa, hold on. 91%. Are you serious?
Dead serious. They use a pretty detailed 100-point scale to figure this out, looking at response times, customer satisfaction, even how many times they had to come back to fix the same problem.
So if I'm understanding this right, you're saying hospitals could potentially get better service and save money by going with an ISO.
It's a real possibility. Of course, it's always smart to do your research, check out different ISOs, and see what they offer.
Right. Don't just jump in blindly.
Exactly. But this data really makes you think twice about that automatic assumption that the OEM always provides the best service just because they made the machine in the first place.
So, like we said before, don't judge a book by its cover, right? Look at their track record, their data.
That's the key. Now, you might be wondering, why are those ISOs scoring so well?
I was just thinking that. Tell me more.
Well, one reason could be that they're a bit more, nimble, more specialized than these huge OEM companies.
They can move faster, adapt quicker.
Yeah, they might focus on certain types of equipment or maybe even just certain regions of the country. That can let them develop really deep expertise and respond to customers faster. And let's not forget about cost. ISOs often have lower overhead, which means they can offer more competitive pricing.
So it's not just about saving money, it's potentially about getting better and faster service, too. Sounds like a win-win for hospitals. But there's got to be more to this service contract story, right?
You are absolutely right. There's a whole other layer of complexity when it comes to these contracts, and that's what we're going to get into next.
All right, lead the way. I'm ready to dive deeper into this service contract jungle.
Well, before we get into all the different types of contracts out there, the report highlights something pretty alarming. It seems like hospitals are drowning in a sea of these things. They're managing hundreds of service contracts at once.
Hundreds? Come on, really, that's got to be a nightmare. Just keeping track of them all, let alone understanding them.
It is. The average hospital, according to this report, is juggling a mind-boggling 146 service contracts. Some even have over 200.
Wow, that's just, I don't even know what to say to that. It's mind-blowing.
And here's the real kicker. All these contracts, they're not standardized. That means hospitals are probably overpaying without even realizing it.
Talk about hidden costs.
They gave an example in the report that really drove this point home. The price of a full-service contract for the same piece of equipment varied wildly, from $7,920 all the way up to $18,600.
That's over $10,000 difference for the same service.
This is the exact same service. No wonder hospitals are struggling to keep those costs down.
So what can they do? I mean, this just seems like such a mess.
Well, that's the million-dollar question. But one thing is for sure. Data is the key. The more hospitals know about what these contracts actually cost, how they're performing, the better they'll be in negotiating fair deals and avoiding those surprise overcharges.
It all comes back to data, doesn't it? Like you said earlier, knowledge is power.
And in this case, that power could save hospitals millions, money that could be going towards patient care, research, all the things that really matter.
Absolutely. This has been a fascinating look at HTM so far, really eye-opening. And it's amazing to see how important data is becoming in this whole process. But before we go any further, I want to hear from you, our listeners. What's standing out to you so far? Has anything we've talked about made you think differently about your own experiences with healthcare, either as a patient or someone who works in the field? Share your thoughts with us. Let's keep this conversation going.
You know, all this talk about service contracts, it really makes you think about the bigger picture. We're not just talking about numbers on a spreadsheet here.
Right.
We're talking about making sure hospitals have what they need to take care of patients, the best care possible.
It's easy to get lost in the weeds, you know? All the details about costs and contracts, you forget about the human side of things.
Exactly. It's not just about saving a few bucks here and there.
Right.
Think about it. Even a small percentage cut in those service contract costs for a hospital, that could mean hiring another nurse or buying a new piece of equipment that could save someone's life.
It's all connected, isn't it?
It is.
It really puts things into perspective. We're not just talking about money, we're talking about lives.
Absolutely.
And that brings us back to what this report really emphasizes. We need a smarter way of doing things when it comes to HTM, more strategic, more big picture thinking. It's not just about fixing things when they break.
Right. It's about planning ahead, being proactive, understanding how each piece of equipment fits into the whole system.
Like a puzzle.
Yes, exactly. And that's where, you guessed it, data comes in again.
Oh, I knew you were going to say that.
Imagine a world where hospitals can see those equipment failures coming before they even happen.
That would be amazing.
Or fine-tuning their inventory based on how things are actually being used in real time.
That sounds almost futuristic.
It kind of is.
Yeah.
But we're seeing those kinds of things in other industries already. Predictive analytics,
Hmm.
powerful stuff.
So you're saying healthcare can catch up?
Absolutely.
Mm.
And think about how much safer things would be for patients if hospitals could get ahead of those equipment problems.
It would be a game changer for sure. And this report really hammers home that data is the key to making all this happen.
It's not just about crunching numbers for the sake of it.
Right.
It's about using those numbers to tell a story, to uncover those hidden insights that can lead to real change.
It's like data is the flashlight and HTM is the detective, right?
Love that analogy. And those HCM professionals, they need the information to make the best choices for their hospitals and ultimately for their patients.
And it's not just the HTM folks who can benefit from this data, right?
Oh, absolutely not. Think about the clinicians, the administrators, even the patients themselves.
How could patients use this data?
Well, imagine if you could easily find information about how reliable the equipment is at different hospitals, or compare the track records of those different service providers.
Wow, that would be incredible. It would really give patients more control over their healthcare decisions.
Exactly. And it would put pressure on those hospitals and providers to keep getting better.
Who doesn't want to be known for having the best equipment and the best service?
Right. It's a win-win for everybody.
Speaking of wins, let's go back to that issue of staff shortages in HTM for a minute. The report touched on it, but I think it's worth digging a little deeper.
Yeah, it's a big one.
I mean, even with all the data in the world, you still need skilled people to make sense of it and put it to use.
You can have the best tools in the world, but you need someone who knows how to use them.
Exactly. And unfortunately, finding those skilled HTM professionals is getting harder and harder.
It's a growing problem.
So what's causing this shortage?
Well, there are a few things going on. One is just the fact that a lot of those experienced HTM folks, they're getting close to retirement.
So it's a generational thing.
Yeah, kind of like what we're seeing with other skilled trades.
The older generation is retiring, but there's not enough young people coming in to replace them.
That's part of it, but it's also an awareness problem.
What do you mean?
A lot of young people just don't even know that HTM is a career option. They don't realize how important it is to healthcare or how many opportunities there are.
It's kind of a hidden gem, isn't it? High demand, good pay, and you get to know you're making a real difference in people's lives.
Exactly. So we need to get the word out there,
Yeah.
encourage more young people to consider HTM as a career path, invest in education and training programs, make sure we've got people ready to step in as that older generation starts to retire.
Makes sense. So we've talked about the challenges and possible solutions, the importance of data, and even the need for more skilled workers. It's been a pretty comprehensive look at HTM, wouldn't you say?
It has.
But I think it's important to take a step back now and think about what all of this means for the everyday person. The patient walking into a hospital.
That's a question we always need to come back to, isn't it?
Absolutely.
At the end of the day, a strong HTM department means better care for patients.
How so?
Well, if hospitals are running smoothly, not wasting money, not scrambling to fix broken equipment all the time, that frees up resources to focus on the things that really matter, the patient.
So it's like a ripple effect.
Exactly. Better HTM means better use of resources, which leads to better outcomes for patients.
And what does that look like for the patients themselves?
Well, it could mean shorter wait times, faster diagnoses, and just that peace of mind knowing that the equipment being used is safe and reliable. Nobody wants to be lying in a hospital bed worrying about whether the machines that are keeping them alive are going to break down.
That's a powerful image. I think we take it for granted how much technology is involved in healthcare these days. But when it fails, the consequences can be serious.
Very serious. And that's why those HTM professionals are so important. They're the ones making sure that technology works the way it's supposed to.
The unsung heroes of healthcare.
I like that.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, let me turn it over to you, our listeners. What are your thoughts on all of this? Has this discussion changed your perspective on HTM at all? What questions do you have? We'd love to hear from you, so keep the conversation going.
Wow, we've really gone deep on this one, haven't we?
We have.
From those financial headaches hospitals are dealing with to those ISOs who knew they were doing so well.
Right.
But for me, the biggest takeaway is just how much data can change things in healthcare. It's amazing.
It really is. It touches on everything we've talked about, all the challenges, the potential solutions, everything. Think about it. In the past, a lot of the decisions about managing medical equipment was all based on gut feeling, experience, maybe just doing things the way they had always been done.
Because that's how we've always done it, the old way.
Exactly. But this report shows that with the right data, we can make smarter decisions more strategic, and ultimately better for everyone.
It's like someone finally turned the lights on. You
Yes.
can actually see what's going on now and make choices based on facts, not just guesses.
Evidence-based decision-making, that's what it's all about.
But it's not enough to just have the data, right? You need to know what to do with it.
You got it.
Yeah.
You need the tools to analyze it, pull out those insights, and figure out how to put those insights into action.
And that's where those platforms like the one from PartsSource come in, right?
Exactly. They give hospitals the tools to make sense of all that data. It's like having a super powerful magnifying glass.
Oh, I like that. You can zoom in and see everything crystal clear.
Yes. See the whole landscape of healthcare technology in a whole new way. And they're not just collecting data, they're helping hospitals turn it into something they can use.
Actionable insights, as they say.
Spot on. They can help find patterns, see trends, even compare how one hospital's doing against others. It lets those HTM departments move beyond just reacting to problems,
They can be proactive.
prevent those issues before they even pop up.
And what I think is really cool is this idea of data democratization.
Democratization.
Yeah. It's like, as this information becomes more accessible, it's not just the folks in charge who benefit. Clinicians, administrators, even the patients themselves, they can all use it to make better choices.
Imagine that. Patients being able to research how reliable the equipment is at different hospitals, or comparing those service providers, seeing who has the best track record.
It would change everything, give patients so much more power.
And you know what? It would push those hospitals and those service providers to constantly improve.
Because nobody wants to be at the bottom of the list, right?
Exactly. It would create this whole culture of excellence across the entire healthcare system. Everyone striving to be the best.
That's a great point. Well, I think that's a perfect place to wrap up our deep dive into healthcare technology management. Lots to think about, that's for sure.
It has been.
We've learned so much today, and I hope you have too, listening out there.
Absolutely.
The big takeaway here is that data is changing healthcare, and those who get on board with that, they're going to be the ones who succeed in the future.
Couldn't agree more.
And to all our listeners, think about the role data plays in your healthcare experiences. What kind of information would help you make better decisions? What questions do you have for your doctors about the technology they're using? The more we talk about this stuff, the better prepared we'll all be to navigate this ever-changing world of healthcare.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. Until next time.